Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the internet, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an awesome honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me here today, as we got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. Ocean's 8 opens as the biggest opening for any Ocean's film. Simon Pegg's going to be directing a film. Suicide Squad 2 gets new directors. What should Kathleen Kennedy do about Star Wars Celebration? That and a whole bunch more. But before we get to that stuff, let's go right off the top with this. There's a big annual conference going on right now, and Kevin Feige was there, being asked by a whole bunch of things. And of course, Kevin Feige is the president of Marvel Studios. And he was asked a little bit about as well, about the fingers crossed for them, pending Disney Fox deal and what could be going on. What's the latest status of that? And Kevin Feige actually said he still doesn't know. Like, he honestly does not know what the status is of that deal. He is just waiting to find out like the rest of us. Now, this, of course, all goes right along with something he said before. He said, honestly, at this point, somebody asked him a short time ago, is he making plans for X-Men characters? Is he making plans for Fantastic Four? And he said, honestly, at this point, I can't do anything. Like, I'm not even thinking, he said, about X-Men or Fantastic Four or any of that stuff until we even know if we have a deal. Now, it's funny because there are still some people out there who think secretly, that Kevin Feige is putting X-Men characters and Fantastic Four characters into Avengers 4. Again, let's reiterate this. They can't do that. If they did that, Comcast could go to the government and say they were colluding. While this was still supposed to be an open, fair market bidding race, blah, 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 they were clearly colluding with each other, and the government would tear whatever deal up. They simply cannot be doing stuff like that. They have to do this all properly, and that means keeping hands completely off anything that Fox has. Because, look, this deal may still not happen. And even if it does happen, they cannot let there be the slightest hint of impropriety, or else that will just give the government more ammunition to step in and say, no, we're shutting this deal down. This is anti-competitive, there was collusion, the blah, 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 and you cannot do that. So I think there's every reason in the world to believe everything Kevin Feige is saying at this point, that, hey, look, he's still in the dark about this. I remember when I used to work for AMC Theaters, big, massive company, and the talks were going on that we may be bought out by this giant Chinese company called Wanda. Now, of course, that deal did go through eventually. Wanda did take over AMC. But I remember talking to one of the presidents of the company, one of the vice presidents, and they also had no idea because it wasn't their department. Now, our CFO knew what was going on because he was the chief financial officer. Of course he would know. But like vice presidents, executive vice presidents, these people had no idea. Kevin Feige isn't even a big executive at Disney. He is the president of Marvel, one of their subsidiary companies. But that's about it. So I don't see any reason not to believe Kevin Feige at this point, and he's still in the dark like the rest of us. Now, we will get some more clear answers here pretty soon, because a shareholders meeting has been called for July, where the shareholders will vote on the Disney offer. And they'll either vote yes, or Comcast will present a better offer that'll make the shareholders vote no. We're going to have to find out, but we'll get a better, clearer picture after that. Now, even if the shareholders vote yes, then the government's got to go over the deal with a fine-tooth comb and decide if they want to try to cause an injunction on us. So we're still a long ways away from anything being really clear, but after July, we might get at least a little bit of a clearer picture. Okay, with all that out of the way, guys, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the world of movie news, so let's get you right to it right now with our daily movie news feed. First up, it's been over 30 years since the first classic Back to the Future film was in theaters, and a few days ago, fans of the franchise got a huge surprise, but alas, it was all a hoax. A Facebook page that passed itself off as Michael J. Fox's page put up this picture of the Back to the Future stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, and Leah Thompson, announcing that they had started work on a Back to the Future 4. However, the whole thing was fake. The account was not Fox's, and the picture in question was taken back at the 2015 London Comic-Con for the original film's 30th anniversary. So, sorry folks, but no Back to the Future 4. And it is crazy how fast this quote-unquote news started shooting all around the internet. I started getting tons of tweets and Facebook messages from people saying, John, did you hear Back to the Future 4 is coming? Back to the Future 4 is coming. This kind of really, especially in the modern social media age, kind of reasserts the importance of looking into the source. Does something almost unbelievable sound like it's coming from a star's or producer's official page? Well, if it sounds like it's too good to be true, double check to see if that's actually their page. So somebody wanted to prey on this and get people excited and get people going. Now, the excitement was understandable, though. I mean, look, Back to the Future is, without dispute, one of the most popular and beloved film franchises of all time. I think people would be very excited to hear, and clearly they were, very excited to hear about a potential Back to the Future 4. However, I think we've got enough hints from the filmmakers and the stars that have said this isn't actually ever going to happen. So while it's completely understandable why people got excited at the news of this, and why on its surface you can see why people would have bought into it, it is something they've made pretty clear is probably never going to happen, and unfortunately this in and of itself is a hoax. Now, I still believe at some point in the future, no pun intended, they may decide to do a Back to the Future remake. I mean, if they make one and it's bad, who cares? We got the originals. If they make one and then it's good, then yay, we've got new Back to the Future films. But as far as Part 4, though, I highly doubt that's ever going to happen. Next up, Simon Pegg has been a fixture in the fan community ever since Shaun of the Dead, and for others long before that with his TV work. But now, the star of Mission Impossible and the Star Trek films is gearing up for a brand new role, the role of a director. According to reports, Pegg will step behind the camera to direct his first feature film later this year. From an interview in Empire magazine, Pegg said the following: "My directorial debut will hopefully be shooting by the end of this year. Nira Park sent me a script last year and said, 'This might be your first film.' I read it and said, 'I think you might be right.' Sure enough, that's what we're gearing up to do in November." Pegg is also a screenwriter and most notably wrote the scripts for such films as World's End and Star Trek Beyond. This just sort of seems like the next natural progression stage in the evolution of the filmmaker entertainer that is Simon Pegg. Now, of course, he will always be most and best well known for working with Nick Frost and Edgar Wright on all the films that they've all done together, both as a trio and some as duos here and there. But we've seen him evolving and doing it. Look, he's been a screenwriter for a long time, but has been doing bigger and more notable projects. I remember it caught a lot of people off guard that he wrote the script for Star Trek Beyond, or at least was one of the main writers. And to me, Star Trek Beyond may be the best Star Trek film in the J.J. Abrams era. It caught a lot of people, including myself, by surprise. I loved that film. I thought it was great. It's really sad that it didn't do so well at the box office, per se. But seeing that he's progressing now to directing films, like I said earlier, seems like the next natural step. Simon Pegg is a natural storyteller. Simon Pegg is a filmmaker. And being so closely associated with Edgar Wright, you knew at some point he'd want to get behind the camera too. Now, the speculation's going to be, what kind of film is this? They didn't give us any indication, no details about what film this could be that we're getting from a Simon Pegg. Could he bring along an Edgar Wright to appear in his film, since he's appeared in so many of Edgar Wright's? Could we see a cameo or a significant role for a Nick Frost? Who knows? Or will he really want to make this one on his own without those guys that he's always been associated with? We'll have to wait and see. I'm going to go out on a limb purely based on speculation. I got nothing to back this up with. I'm going to guess it's going to be some form of genre film. Whether it's going to be like a little bit of sci-fi in there, whether it's going to have a little bit of horror, something he knows and understands that he's comfortable with. It wouldn't be the worst idea in the world for him to make his first directorial debut in a genre or in a type of film that he's very well versed in and he knows really well. Something like A World's End or Hot Fuzz or Paul or something along those lines. Now, he could go straight drama. He could go straight comedy. He could do that. But I've got a feeling he's going to stay a little bit in his comfort zone, which is a good idea for his first film, and we'll see something genre-related. Whatever it is, I'm sure he's probably going to do a great job. Like, this is a guy who's been in and around the camera, both in front of it and behind it, worked very closely with Edgar Wright for a long time. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do and see if he can continue to evolve himself. My one fear is that he might be a little bit too good at it, and we see Simon Pegg more and more direct and write instead of seeing him in front of the camera, and I just adore seeing him in front of the camera. So I hope he's not too successful. Is that weird? Next up, the horror remake It was a surprise smash success, taking in over $700 million at the worldwide box office. The question has been, who would be playing the adult versions of the Losers Club in the It Chapter 2 film? We've known for a while some of them. However, we now know the final piece. The actor who will play the adult version of Mike is none other than Isaiah Mustafa, the guy who played one of the greatest commercial characters of all time, the Old Spice guy. From Cinema Blend, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader, James McAvoy, James Ranson, and Jay Ryan have filled out the other spots. The only loser left was Mike Hanlon, and now that part is filled as well. It Chapter 2 is scheduled to hit theaters on September 6th, 2019. Right off the bat, it's important to realize that Isaiah has done more than just the Old Spice guy. Like recently he was on Freeform's Shadowhunters, right? He's done other acting work. He is an actor. He's not just some guy who came out of nowhere and was the Old Spice guy. However, can we talk about those Old Spice commercials he did? I honestly think if you were put together a top 10 list of the greatest ad campaigns, the Old Spice campaign with Isaiah in them as the Old Spice Man is one of the greatest, funniest, creative, and also visually. Like I remember, like from a visual effects point of view, how they did a whole bunch of the stuff that they did in those commercials was amazing. So it's going to be kind of a kick to see him in there, and I'm sure he got it based on his acting prowess. Now, let's talk about It Chapter 2 as a whole for a second. The first It caught everybody by surprise by just how good it was. And we got a little bit of a hint as to how good it was going to be when the trailer started to come out. We were like, whoa, they like really seem to capture a very cool tone with this thing. And sure enough, it played itself out throughout the entire movie. Audiences loved it. Huge box office, set all kinds of records, that kind of stuff. Now, you're facing a big challenge. Going into It, there were no high expectations. Going into It Chapter 2, there are mountainous high expectations. People are going into that expecting something great. Now that can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. As far as the casting of this film goes, they've knocked it out of the park so far. Obviously, the crown jewel in that is a Jessica Chastain, but also James McAvoy, Bill Hader, things like that is all great as well. So they're doing a really good job putting a great cast together. Can they bring the movie together as a whole package? Again, the biggest challenge they're going to face is their own success from the first film. Because going into that first film, not a lot of expectations. Because of how great that was, they're now going to be victims of their own success in that they are going to be facing really high expectations from audiences. Maybe that can push them to be even better. Hopefully it doesn't intimidate them too much. But I like the casting all around, and throwing in a name like Isaiah's I think is pretty cool. Next up, the early tracking estimates had Ocean's 8 opening in the $35 million range, and the film has exceeded those expectations. According to Box Office Mojo, the film opened with the biggest opening of any of the Ocean's films. The movie came in at $41 million for its opening weekend, beating out Ocean's 12, which had opened to just over $39 million. The result was good enough to make Ocean's 8 the #1 film at the box office this weekend. From the LA Times, released more than a decade after the male-centered Ocean's 13, led by George Clooney, the latest entry costs an estimated $70 million to make and stars Sandra Bullock as the sister of Danny Ocean. She assembles a skilled crime crew which includes Sarah Paulson, Cate Blanchett, Mindy Kaling, Helena Bonham Carter, Aquafina, I just hate even saying that word, and Rihanna, to pull off a high-stakes theft at the New York's annual Met Gala involving an actress who is played by Anne Hathaway. Now, I put up my review of Ocean's 8, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. Number one, I'm a big sucker for heist films, and this was a great heist film. And it's all heist from beginning to end, and I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed it. It also works as a comedy, not a great comedy, but it works as a comedy on that level as well. So I was hoping it could hit that $35 million opening expectation. That would have been a really nice number for it, especially like when you can make half of your production budget in just your opening weekend. That means you're off to a great start. Exceeding those expectations is great. What I did not expect it to do was coming in as now officially the highest grossing opening weekend of any of the Ocean's films. So that just goes to show people were still interested in this particular title, in this particular intellectual property, and they were interested in an all-female version of the crew. It doesn't hurt that you packed it full of Academy Award winners as well, and great performances, and that all worked too. So the movie's good. It's a great heist film. It's a good comedy overall. It deserves the success it got. Coming in over expectations just poises it really well, and I would expect, if no other Ocean's film managed to make this much money on its opening weekend and they got several sequels, I wouldn't be surprised at all if already over at the studio they're talking about an Ocean's 9 or whatever, Ocean's 8 Part 2 or whatever it is kind of naming terminology they're going to want to go for. And I'll tell you what, I'll be happy to hear about it because this was a nice little movie. I'd look forward to seeing another one. And finally, the first Suicide movie may have gotten mixed reactions at best, but there's no debating that it was a box office success, taking in almost $750 million at the box office. We've known for some time that Warner Brothers was keen on making another one, and the sequel has just taken a big step forward. According to reports, the project has just brought on screenwriters David Barr Katz and Todd Stashwick to co-write the script for Suicide Squad sequel alongside director Gavin O'Connor. From The Hollywood Reporter, Legends of Tarzan's Adam Kozad had previously worked on a script to the sequel. Warner Brothers has multiple projects at various stages of development in the works with Suicide Squad characters, including several that could star Robbie's Harley Quinn character and Leto's Joker character. No release dates have been set for any of them. And I already know some of the response we're going to get to this. Whenever any kind of Warner Brothers DC Universe film gets announced or talked about, I get a barrage of, and yet where's Man of Steel 2? And yes, I got a lot of those yesterday as well. And that's a good question. Like, where is the Batman film? Where is Man of Steel 2? We're getting like 5 Harley Quinn movies, 17 Joker films. And, you know, at any moment now, we're going to get the Wonder Twin Powers movie announced at some point. And still, we won't have a Batman or Man of Steel 2. Still, this is, honestly, it's a no-brainer. The first Suicide Squad comes out, makes nearly $750 million. That is one of the biggest successes they've had financially at any point. And therefore, it only stands to reason that you'd want to move ahead with it. Now, look, I may be questioning some of the moves that they're doing at Warner Brothers right now. I still feel they need to reboot this puppy. But honestly, at $750 million, you can see the appeal and the allure. Now, the first one got very mixed reviews, both from audiences and critics. I was one of them that I liked it. It was a hot mess of a movie, but I thought it had a lot of fun in it, so I enjoyed it. Will audiences come back to watch Suicide Squad 2? That is the question. Was the first one divisive enough to keep audiences away? Did the fact that a bunch of people saw Wonder Woman and they did not come back to the theater to watch Justice League, are we going to see that carry over into a Suicide Squad? Hell, are we going to see that carry over into an Aquaman movie that we have coming up and we're probably going to talk about here in just a little bit as well? That's going to be the question. Can they convince the audience that didn't like the movie? I mean, obviously, the audiences that like the movie, they're coming back. But can Warner Brothers convince the audiences that did not like Suicide Squad to come back? Because you're going to need them to come back. Even though they didn't like the first one, they need to come back and support this one for this one to have any sort of a chance. Can they do that? I don't know. That's going to be the question up in the air. Obviously, I'm a sucker for comic book movies. I'll be their opening day. But can they get the other people back there to make this thing a success? And that will become the billion-dollar question here. And that's the piece of the puzzle that they've got to work out. Because even if you do almost everything else right, if you cannot get the audiences that didn't like the first one to come back, then nothing else will matter. They won't succeed. Can they do that? That's the question. We're just going to have to wait to find out. And that'll do it for today's installment of the Movie News Feed. And now you are all caught up to date with everything going on in the world of movie news, so it is time for us to go over to the main topics. Now, of course, the main topics are submitted by you guys. How do you submit a main topic here to be on the John Campea Show? It's really quite simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com and put the word topic in the subject line. Once again, put the word John, or email me at john@thejohncampeashow.com, put the word topic in the subject line, and keep the emails, guys, to 90 words or less, or else it'll just simply be too long for me to even use on the show. All right, let's go to the first topic that you guys sent in. And the first email today comes to us from Jerry Martin, who writes, "Hey, John, great show." Thank you so much, Jerry. "Could you please help me understand what's the difference between story and screenplay? Thanks a lot." Okay, so I've actually gotten a few people emailing me about this recently, about they'll see a credit on IMDb that says story by, and they'll see a credit that says screenplay by, right? And a lot of people think, well, aren't those the same thing? Actually, they're not. It's a very simple difference. Let's say, for argument's sake, I don't know, let me come up with a movie here. Let's say Ant-Man, okay? Let's say Ant-Man. Let's say I went to Kevin Feige with this idea for a story, and I give him like a 3-minute pitch. Okay, so you got this guy who's a thief. He's been in prison. He gets out. He's hired to rob this guy's house. And there's a suit in there, and it ends up being the Ant-Man suit. And the guy's house was the original Ant-Man. And now the original man decides he wants to use him as his guy, and there's this thing going on with a guy who took over Hank Pym's company. Hank Pym's, the bad guy who's trying to take over the company, he becomes Yellowjack, and he wants to sell it to Hydra, and it works out like this. So I give him the basic idea. I tell him the story, right? In like 2 minutes, I give him the story. And Kevin Feige goes, great, I'm going to hire this writer over here to write it out into a script. So there's the difference. I came up with the story. The screenwriter now takes that story, that 2-minute pitch, that here's all the beats, here's basically my outline for the story, and now turns that into a 115-page screenplay and actually fleshes it all out and writes it out. That's the difference. So you can see story by so-and-so. That means that guy came up with the basic idea. Okay, what if we had our character do this? This is our villain. Here's their conflict. At some point they do this, and then they move on to this, and then in Act 3, we work out this, and this, and this, and does like a 2 or 3 page outline. This is our story. That's story by. Then they get a screenwriter to actually do the hard work of now fleshing that all out and making a screenplay. So that's I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, for sure I am, but that gives you a basic idea that when you see a credit says story by, that doesn't mean they wrote it. That just means they kind of came up with the general outline. And then the screenwriter is the one who does the heavy lifting that actually goes in and fleshes the whole thing out. So that's basically the difference between the story by and that. And also, sometimes you can see a story by credit where it's like, if somebody's basing a movie on a book, let's say I wrote a book, right? And it's called Loving Your Mouse is the name of the book. Learn to love your mouse. That's the name of my book, right? And somebody decides I want to make a movie out of that, and they get a screenwriter to write a screenplay for it. I may get a story by credit. I'll get like story by John Campea. So again, I'm oversimplifying it, but that gives you the general idea. Okay, let's move on to the second topic. And the second topic today comes to us from Ben G, who writes, good day from Australia. Good day, Ben. I was wondering if you think Kathleen Kennedy will still be around come Star Wars Celebration, and if so, do you think she will address the fans and try to salvage the broken fandom? Also, what kind of reception do you think she will get from the crowd? All right, so there's a whole bunch of questions in there. First off is this. Will Kathleen Kennedy still be around come Celebration? The only way she won't be is if she decides to step down. That's the only way. Disney is not kicking her out the door. I know there are some people who are kind of guessing or speculating that Disney will fire her because of the flopping of Solo. Yes, they're not going to fire her over that. Sorry. The previous 3 films she oversaw all crossed the $1 billion mark. One of them crossed the $2 billion mark. The previous 3 films got her $4.5 billion. They're not sending her anywhere. Now, should Star Wars Episode 9 come out and fall flat on its face, that can change. That changes the circumstances, doesn't it? But as of right now, as far as Disney's concerned, Kathleen Kennedy's job is totally secure. The only way she's going in is she decides to step down. You guys all know that I personally feel she should step down, and I made a video laying out my case. I'm a fan of Kathleen Kennedy's, but I think she should step down, but whatever. So I don't think there's any chance really, barring her making the decision, that she's going to go anywhere. She'll still be there. Disney still has her as the head of Lucasfilm. Should she go to Celebration? Well, yeah, if she's still the head of Lucasfilm, you got to go to Celebration. You can't hide out in a cave somewhere. You can't, stay safely hidden away in San Francisco at Skywalker. You've got to be there. You absolutely have to be there. Now, what kind of reception will she get? I'll tell you what kind of reception she'll get. She'll get a standing ovation. She's going to get a massive standing ovation. And the main reason for that is, I think, again, the number of people who like the new Star Wars movies outnumber those who don't. So that's number one. There's a significant group that don't, absolutely. But as of right now, the group that does like the new Star Wars movies, they massively outnumber those who don't. Fine. But the main reason I think if she goes to Celebration, when she takes the stage, the reason I think she's going to get a massive standing ovation is because I think a lot of the people who are right now turned off by the current Star Wars situation, they're not going to go. I think the majority of the people who don't like the direction Star Wars is going and aren't happy with Star Wars right now, I think it's just common sense that a lot of them aren't going to go. Some of them will still go for sure, but I think a lot of them aren't going to want to go. Like if you're not happy, if you hate something right now, you're not going to go to a big celebration of it at the moment, right? I think it just stands, and that's understandable. That's totally understandable. So, yeah, I think, like, for instance, if you were to have a Transformers con, and they do have something like that, but if you were to have had a Transformers con the year after the first Transformers movie came out, I would have been there. I totally would have been there because I love the first Transformers movie. However, I've hated all the other ones since. So if you were to have a Transformers con today, I love Transformers, but I'm not going to travel across the country to go to a Transformers con when I don't even like the film franchise right now, right? And that's totally fair. So I think a lot of the people, most people who would say boo Kathleen Kennedy at such an event, they won't even be there. So I think, I think she will be there. I think she will get up. I don't think she's going to address at all. She should, but she won't. She won't address the fracture in the fandom at the moment because it's Star Wars Celebration. They're going to want to keep Celebration positive and on a big high note and lots of positives, and that's where they're going to keep their focus. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know that that's a bad idea. Like personally, I think she should address it, but even I will say, you guys know I've been harping on this for a while. Kathleen Kennedy, one of the reasons I think Kathleen Kennedy should step down is that she has said nothing about the division in the fandom. And I believe as the leader of Star Wars, she should at least step out and say something. But even I might say maybe Star Wars Celebration isn't the place to do that. Maybe. So I don't think they will, and I can get where they're coming from because they want to keep it positive. So, will she be around? Yes. What kind of reception is she going to get? She's going to get massive ovations for it. Will she address any of the significant problems going on right now? No, she won't. And I can probably understand why, because Celebration is meant to be a big positive experience. So that's where my thinking on all that is right now at any point. All right, let's move on to the final email of the day. And the final email today comes to us from Jed Jennsen, who writes, "Hey, John. In the aftermath of May's crowded box office hurting Solo, and with the Bumblebee, Spider-Man, Mortal Engines trailers coming out this week, I started thinking DC really needs to hit right now. So, should they take a lesson from Solo and move Aquaman to January?" Well, you know what? Let me bring something up here. Because I talked about this on the show the other day, but it cannot be emphasized enough. The release schedule right around when Aquaman, by the way, I love that graphic that Ray put together. The release schedule that is out right now is nuts, okay? So Aquaman is opening on December 21st. On the exact same day, we've got Alita Battle Angel, the Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly comedy, Holmes and Watson, and Bumblebee and Aquaman all on the same day. Alita Battle Angel, Aquaman, Bumblebee, Holmes and Watson all opening on the same day. Just 1 week before that, we got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Peter Jackson's new Mortal Engines. And on the week after Aquaman opens, we got the Mary Poppins, y'all. We got Mary Poppins opening just the week after. It is a psychotically packed thing. I mean, and just forget the week before and the week after. The day Aquaman opens, you got Alita Battle Angel and Bumblebee. I mean, sometimes you can do counter programming, but these are three movies that are going to be going after a lot of the same audience. Alita Battle Angel may be a little bit of a different audience, but definitely Bumblebee and Aquaman are going after the same demographic. Should Aquaman move? Yeah, they should move. They should move. Not because, and that's not a sign of weakness or anything like that. It's making a smart business decision. Like, I remember when Wonder Woman 2 moved to get further away from Star Wars Episode 9, some people saying, oh, Warner Brothers. No, it was making a smart business decision. You're not in here to compare penis sizes. You're here to make money and to make smart business decisions. I think the smart business decision here for Aquaman is to move it. Maybe move it to late January 2019. Maybe move it up, depending on how far along. Maybe move it into early November, depending how far along they are on the process. If they still need the time, then move it back to late January or something like that. I just think right now, you're looking at a disaster. when on this same day, just 1 week after Mortal Engines and Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, you got Alita Battle Angel, Aquaman, Bumblebee, Holmes and Watson, all on the same day. I think this is spelling disaster. I think the smart, prudent move right here would be for to get Warner Brothers, Paramount, Fox, and Sony. These are the 4 studios behind those 4 films to come together, sit down at, I don't know, Bosanova Restaurant in Hollywood, have like 4 reps from the 4 companies come sit down and say, okay, look, we're all just going to hurt ourselves if we all open all these big major films all on the same day. 1 or 2 of us should probably move. Let's negotiate. Like, hey, if you'll move off this date, we'll move something else to get out of your way if you want to open in January or February. Like, come together, negotiate it out, because right now, opening these films, particularly the 3, Alita, Bumblebee, and Aquaman, all on the same day, nothing good is going to come out of this. Nothing good is going to come out of this. And it could, and you're right. Right now, Warner Brothers really needs this to do well. And it doesn't need, look, Aquaman doesn't need to make 200 million opening weekend. It doesn't even need to make 150 opening weekend, but it's got to come close to 100. It's got to come close to 100. Get in that 80, 85 range, 80, 85 to $100 million. That's where it needs to come in. And as of right now, it's not going to. Not opening on the same day as all these films. It's just not going to. So I think the smart thing for them to do. Now, will they move it? It all depends. Like I said, these are smart companies. I think they will negotiate. I think they're on the phone with each other and they're trying to work out a good opportunity. And if somebody presents, Warner Bros., hey, look, this other date is a good date and we've got this other film on it, but we will move that film off that date to allow you, Warner Brothers, to move Aquaman to that date instead. That way, we free up the 21st a little bit. You get a nice release date, a little more to yourself, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure these discussions are going on, and hopefully something good will come of it. All right, guys, with all that out of the way, we got just a couple minutes left. We got a whole bunch of live questions that have come in. So let's get over and take some of your live questions. And the first live question today comes to us from Peyton Williams, who writes, I could have died in an accident a few days ago. Glad to live another day and catch an episode of your show. Man, that has happened to me. I can think of 2 times that I have barely escaped from my life from certain accidents. And it's it really makes you go, ugh, and put things into perspective. So I'm glad the worst didn't happen, man. I'm glad you're around to watch the show today, Peyton. All right, next one comes to us from Luke1234. You don't like Halloween, but what about Friday the 13th? Yeah, I think Friday the 13th, the original, is a superior film to the original Halloween. I know a lot of people disagree with me about that. I get it. People yell and scream at me when I say I don't actually like the original Halloween that much, but it is what it is. Luke1234 follows it up with, any more news on the possible 1987 RoboCop sequel? None. We heard a while ago, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, the studio could be working on, much like how Halloween's got a direct sequel, there was some talk about a RoboCop sequel that was a true sequel to the original. Heard nothing about it since. Now, there may have been some news that come out, but it hasn't hit my radar, so I'm actually not aware. And by the way, the remake they did a little while ago, nowhere near as good as the original, but actually wasn't a bad little film. The RoboCop remake with Michael Keaton was not a bad little film. Not great, nothing to write home about, but it was actually pretty good. I enjoyed watching it, but again, nowhere near as good as the original one, for sure. Toothless writes, John, I sent you an email regarding the Discord server I've already created for the fans. It's a healthy, thriving, and I hope to discuss it further with you in the future. Well, I appreciate that. If I ever do a Discord chat server, I will create one that's an official one. Because I remember when I was starting the Facebook group, right? I had a bunch of people write to me and say, John, I've already created a Facebook group. I said, that's awesome, and I appreciate that. But if I do decide to launch an official Facebook group, I need to do it. It needs to be official and blah, blah, blah. So I'm kind of probably thinking the same thing of Discord. So if I don't have one right now, so if you guys have a Discord server where you guys are all chatting about stuff going on here on the show, that's awesome. If I ever decide, and I'm not sure I will, but if I ever decide to actually launch an official Discord server, then I will probably just start a new one. It's not going to be one that somebody else created, because that creates a whole bunch of problems. None of them are your fault or anybody else's fault, but it's the same reason why I had to create an official Facebook page for the John Campea Show. It's the same reason why I would, if I did a Discord server, and I'm not even sure that I will, I would have to launch one that's an official one that I create myself. But I appreciate that, man. I really do. And I appreciate that you guys are taking the initiative amongst yourselves to create communities where you guys can talk about movies and stuff like that. That's awesome. All right. Let's move on here. Rodrigo Ortiz writes, my new saying after I see a good trailer for a movie that comes out later this year, well, I hope Movie Pass is still around and that comes out. Yep. I still feel like any day we're going to get an announcement that Movie Pass is closing its doors. It was kind of doomed to begin with, but hey guys, there's still Cinemia. There's still Cinemia. Moves, where'd we go here? Muse Tack Reviews writes, I meant origin change in terms of were you familiar with the original Cloak and Dagger origins? Did you like did you like that they changed it up for the show? Okay, so Muse Tack, you gotta get a little bit more context. This is coming from a question Muse Tack asked me on another show. I think he asked me if I liked the changes they made for the show, and I said, well, they didn't change anything. The show is the show. The comics are the comics. They didn't change anything. Whatever they do on the show is the show. So he's reiterating, no, do you like the changes that they made? Well, I think what they did for the show works for the show. Like, yeah, I know in the comics, like, both of them are runaways, and they didn't get their powers from, like, an oil rig explosion. In the comics, I think they got their powers from, like, they got injected by some, like, mad dealer, stuff like this. She didn't come from poverty and a broken home because of the death of the father. She actually comes from a hype, and her mother was a supermodel. So there's a whole bunch of differences between the Cloak and Dagger comic and the Cloak and Dagger show. But again, I really got to reemphasize, I do not look, whatever they do in the show, I do not view as changes. The show is a totally different thing. Whatever they do in the show, they do for the show. And all I can say is, what they've done in the show, I think has worked. And for those of you who are curious about it, I did put up my review for the first 2 episodes of Cloak and Dagger. It's up on my YouTube channel right now. Just go to my YouTube front page and look down under reviews, and my Cloak and Dagger review should be there. So I really don't look at it in terms of changes. I just look at it, did what they did for the show work? That's the only question I ask. And to me, yes, what they did in the show for me worked. Mustach Review follows it up with Krypton Season 2, Gifted Season 2, Runaway Season 2, ooh, Black Lightning Season 2, choose one. That's tough because I have liked all these shows. Gifted and Krypton in particular, because I really thought those 2 shows would be bad. I didn't have a lot of hope for Black Lightning either, but I gotta say, if I could only take one, Krypton Season 2, Gifted Season 2, Runaway Season 2, or Black Lightning Season 2, I like them all, and I'm looking forward to Season 2 of all of them. If I had to pick one, I'm picking Runaways Season 2. I just thought the first season of Runaways was beyond exceptional. I think it was the best out of that bunch. So I would go Runaways Season 2. All right, just a couple more quick ones here, guys. Ryan Irwin Dihill writes, just from the trailer, I can tell Claire Foy is going to steal the show in First Man. Very good actress. Can't wait to see where her career goes. Yeah, and Claire Foy's got a lot of stuff going on right now. Like, there's not only that, but the first trailer for The Girl in the Spider's Web just came out, and she looks great in that too. I mean, we are heading into a Claire Foy era, I believe. Like, she got so much attention for The Queen, which is understandable. She was great in The Queen. But between First Man and The Girl in the Spider's Web, this could be, we could see like Claire Foy, I'm not saying we're there yet, but she could become the big name actress over the next couple of years. So we'll just have to wait and see. Edgar Magna writes, box office predictions for It 2, more or less than the first. Impossible to say at this point. Impossible to say. Let's wait to see some trailers, see what kind of buzz it generates. At this point, I'd just be pulling a guess out of my ass. So I really have no predictions. Let's see what the first trailers look like so we can get a sense for the movie and a sense for how the audience is responding to it. Then we can start putting together some box office predictions. Right now, it would just be folly. Folly, I tell you, to even try to guess. Mustach Ryu says, ha, my real name is actually Mustafa, much like Isaiah Mustafa, who is going to be in It Chapter 2. Michael Myers writes, I'm curious, John, where in theaters do you sit? I have 2 preferred places. And they're normally in AMC theaters. So normally you get a front 3 or 4 rows. Then you've got an aisle, right, that the audiences come in at. You know, you come into the theater, there's an aisle, and then you can go this way to the front 3 or 4 rows, and then there's the main section here that everybody sits on, right? I like the front row of the second section where the bars are. So there's no seats in front of you. The places that are reserved for wheelchair accessible people to come in and sit there. I like that so I can sit in my seat and put my feet up on the bars. That's what I like. If I can't get those, I like sitting in the back 2 rows on the aisle, like right on the aisle, so that if I have to get up and go to the bathroom or anything like that, I don't have to walk in front of everybody. That's where I like to be. All right, guys, that's all the time I have for today. Listen, for those of you who sent in live questions that I didn't have time to get around to, don't you worry. I'm going to take them. I'm going to use them in the next companion video. Of course, guys, my latest companion video went up this morning. So if you guys sent in a question today that I didn't have time to get around to, it will be in the next companion video, so don't you worry about that. All right, guys, that will do it for me for today's installment of the show. Listen, do me a favor, guys. If you guys like my show and you like my programming, do me a favor. Head on over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. There you get all the information about what it means to be a Patreon supporter, how Patreon keeps this show on the air, and what benefits there are to being a Patreon supporter, like Star Wars Talk Tuesdays is for Patreon supporters only now. We've got audio-only versions of the podcast that go out to our subscribers. We've got a Facebook exclusive group and some other things as well. So go check that out, and maybe you'll decide to become a Patreon supporter too. If you do, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine. I'm just honored that you're here being a film fan with us. All right, guys, don't forget, a little bit later today, we've got open mic. That'll be at 2 o'clock. I might do another World of Warcraft streaming session a little bit later, too. So that'll do it for me for today, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.